And then after the chakra systems, we're going to start looking at the energy fields of the body. And then from the immediate ones, such as the etherical body and what is often called the aura, which is simply your thoughts and your feelings and your your physical body also emits light. That sometimes is mistaken for auras. It's usually a disease when it does that. And we'll look at those which are in close, and then we'll go to the fields like that, the crystalline structure fields out there, because that's where I really want to get to. But we'll start in and go out from there. But we'll start with this aspect by talking about the inner chakras. And to understand the inner chakras that run inside the body, we'll look at first just the eight chakra system. It's the simpler one. And see what's the origin of that. And in order to look at the 8 chakra system, it's easiest to compare it to sound and music. We've already seen how music and organic structure are interrelated. We saw that with the bees, and we saw that in the spine, how the spinal column and the weights of it were equivalent to the differences in cycles per second in music. And so in order to talk the way that energy flows through the octave in terms of music and just the way you play music, between the steps and the half steps and all these things in music, is identical to the way energy flows up the spine. It's exactly the same. So if you can understand it in music, you can understand it in the body. And a lot of the Sufi groups learned with this, especially Gurdjieff. For those of you who have studied Gurdjieff, I'm going to give you an image that he didn't know about, that he searched for, I believe, most of his life, which is the sacred image that was behind the Enneagram and behind the work that he was doing. But anyway, to start with, we'll look at the octave up here, just do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Between the third and the fourth note, this is a whole step, but between the third and the fourth note, between mi and fa, there is a half step. There's also a half step between ti and do, between the seventh and eighth note. Those two places. Now, in musical instruments, that's built in. Like in a flute, the way they arrange the holes is such that it's already built into there, so you don't have to work it out. If you play something like a violin, where you've got a fretless situation, then you have to know how to do that. It's not built in. Or a guitar, it's built in because you've got the frets in there. Because if you look at the spacings of them and everything. But so it goes between those two places. And if you look at it, it goes into, there's 2 patterns in there that repeat themselves. It goes 1, 2, 3, half step 4, 1, 2, 3, half step 4. There's 2 sets of patterns. And one of them you can call female and one of them you can call male. Though it's debatable which way you want to do that. And that there is a difference between this male or female pattern and this male pattern. It's between fa and so, or the 4th and the 5th note. Right there. It's the differences between male and femaleness. And Gurdjieff used to talk about this place and how if this was a cosmic scale, that a tiny, tiny, itty-bitty change that was made between the 4th and the 5th note would affect the whole cosmos dramatically in a big way. And so you got 3 places here, this place, these 2 half steps, and this place between the 4th and the 5th that we need to identify in terms of shape and form. This is the Enneagram that Gurdjieff used. It was a 2-dimensional representation of this, and both of these are 2-dimensional representations of something that is an actual sacred form. Neither one of these are sacred geometry. Gurdjieff didn't know about sacred geometry. But this is a pattern that is one step removed. This is kind of like the work of Walter Russell. His work was one step removed from sacred geometry. And but it has a lot of similarities. They've discovered that there's a flow in here, inside of here, and that flow in the Enneagram goes from 1 to 4 to 2 to 8 to 5 to 7 to 1 again. And those are called the wings. And there's another flow that goes from 3, 6, 9 in here. And I'm not going to get into the Enneagram, that's not my real purpose here, but except to say that the reason that there are 9 points in the Enneagram, and there's really a 10th one in the center, which is seldom talked about, which the way these two things relate together, why there's 9 points on here and there's 8 notes up in the air, at first it doesn't look like they correspond. And that's because the 2 half steps are considered as important as the rest of the pattern. So it really goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The 10th one, or the repeat, is the one in the middle. And this pattern can be applied to just about everything that has a sound implication, which is everything. And people like, if you remember Oscar Ichazo, does anybody remember him in Eureka? And his work, he had 12 men who came around him also, and they began to teach a geometrical means of enlightenment. And one of those, which was one of his teachers, was Claudio Naranjo, who was a really good teacher. And he discovered how personality types are associated with this, and that there are 27 primary personality types that once you know the formula, you can just look at a person and you know everything about them really, really fast. And it's far more accurate than the 12 personality types of the astrology. But anyway, that's not my job here to get into all that stuff. This is mostly what I want you to see up here, is how this works. Now, the chakra system, well, first of all, the hidden sacred form that is behind it, which only makes sense anyway, since you've got biology and sound that are interlinked, is the same one that creates the biological life forms, the egg of life. These are the 8 notes of the eight-note scale. And you can even identify these 2 half steps in the fourth that's placed between the male and the 4th and 5th. And so what I'm going to do is show you how this works. And though it's intuitive in what you're going to see here, this is really a lattice or a grid. And there is a one below, and there's a one we're in, there's a one above. In terms of the chakras also, there's a set of chakras below you, and there's a set of chakras that you are in, and there's a set of chakras above you. The set of chakras below you are compressed, and they are in the ratio of the phi ratio, meaning that if this was the length of the set of chakras below you, that the one you're in would be approximately that high, and the ones that go above you would be approximately that high. They are much farther stretched out above you, and they're super compressed below you. This is where you came from, this is where you are now, and this is where you're going. And but just to look at music, first of all, this here, and to see how music, what sound does when it moves through this basic structure. Sound comes in from below at this first note, from what was below, and which is the first note, do. It's now entered into this white tetrahedron. Maybe I should do it the other way around, since they've got that one arranged like that. It comes in first as this black tetrahedron. Now there's 3 places that it could go to. It's in the black tetrahedron. It has to move to one of these 3 places. For our purposes, it doesn't matter. Experientially, it might matter because it's mother, father, child, but male, female, and neutral. But for our purposes, it has to go somewhere, and we're just going to pick one. So say it goes here. So now this is Do and Re on here. It now has 2 left over. It's got to pick one. So we'll pick this one over here. So it goes to this one. So this is Do, Re, and Mi. No matter how it did it, it moved in an equilateral triangle. Do, Re, Mi. Okay? Equal spaces between them. All right? But now, it has to change direction. It either went in this equilateral triangle, or this one. One of the 3. Or it could have went this way or this way. There's only 6 possibilities. But now it has to get back here. It has to change direction from this flat plane that it's moving in, which is the first 3 notes. And it has to change direction and come back here to this one. And all I can do is kind of remember how shadow forms are the key, and I can only give you a right brain explanation of this. I'm going to go in here. Okay, you've got this little rod, and this would be the whole note step between the Do, Re, and Mi. But then when it has to turn and go out of the plane, look what happens to a shadow form of a turn. It shortens. It gets shorter. So in other words, the length between this one and this one and this one is a whole note. But when it turns and goes back to the other one to get back to here, the experience of it is that it's shorter. And so you have Do, Re, Mi, half step to Fa. It's now completed the black tetrahedron. And in order to continue on, it has to change polarity from female to male. And there's only one way it can do that. It goes right through 0 point, from 4 to 5 over here, right through the center, through the womb. And it passes right through the middle, over to the opposite polarity from 4 to 5. And that's what Gurdjieff was really talking about. It's in 0 point between 4 and 5, between Fa and So. And so a little tiny change in the great void will make a huge change out in the reality. So now it gets over here onto, they went into half state 4, came over here to 5, say like this. It's now here, and it moves for the next 3 in a flat plane. Whichever way it wants to go, it'll come around, and it goes for So, La, Ti. Up like this. Again, whole step notes, because it's all in one plane of movement. But then it has to make another half step, another angular change away from the plane to get up to the top. And so you end up with another half step between Do and Ti. Now, your chakra system is one of these things opened up, running up your spine. And so you have the same things going on between your 8 chakras. You have blocks, changes of angles between 3 and 4 and 7 and 8. You also have a very special place between 4 and 5, between the heart and between sound. So in the 8-point chakra, you have one at the base of the spine. You then have a second one, which is just a little bit higher, up in there. You have Another one up here. So you got these 8 chakras. This one really is the pineal gland in the center of the head. Here, this one's above the head. This one doesn't sit here, it sits over here in the front. I'm going to show you this in a moment. This is the first point, I just want to show them as a straight line, but they're not exactly that way. And so energy comes in from another dimensional level. In other words, you get born here into this world. You came from some other place. And when you do, you have 3 chakras that, the first, second, and third, that become your domain of expression, or they become like lenses to interpret the reality through. And you can't get up any higher because there's this half step here. There's a block, there's a wall right here that God put there. And so let me go to the body here a moment. The same thing is true with color. This cube, the color wavelengths correspond to sound in the same way. Though many people have tried to take the 7 notes of sound and correspond. See, there's only 3 primary and 3 secondary, and they've tried to add another color to correspond, to get the color linked in with that. But really what it is, it comes in as white. It then goes up to the 3 primary colors, goes across the other side and comes to 3 secondary colors, turns and becomes black. But then black becomes white onto the next grid. And so it's really a combination of 3 primary, 3 secondary, black and white, that are the key to all of that. This is, I really need to redo this drawing, but these are the, and this is much more complicated. There's actually a rotational motion going up the spine, and females rotate up one way and males rotate up the other way up the spine. And so I've got this first division here showing this rotational energy. The one for the male is actually in space for the sexual energy. The penis goes up to. The female one is not back there, though. It's actually in here further, but I divided them further so you could see there's a division. And there's a half step in between here that blocks a wall that keeps anything from consciousness from moving higher. And then there is another wall back here, which is at the back of the head. This is why the Egyptians used that 45-degree thing on the back of the head. The chakra, the half-step chakra, is this little bump that's on the back of your head. This is, just to give you an idea, this is what happens. Life comes in here. It comes into a brand new reality, which is what we're all about to do. We're all about to die here, you might say, and be born into another reality. And when you go into this new reality, it's new. Meaning you don't know anything about anything. Nothing corresponds with anything you know. The colors aren't the same, shapes don't make sense, nothing. You don't know what anything is. And you're just, when you were a little baby, when you came in here, you might have, you didn't know what anything was. It takes a while to understand what it is. So you only have really one thing on your mind. You're not interested, at that point, you're not going to be interested in how much money you got in your bank account or anything else. You're going to only be interested in one thing, and that's survival. That's staying there. That's going to be your total, absolute, complete focus. You're in this world, and you're going to try to do everything you can to stay into this new world. But at some point, you will master that, and you will figure it out how to be there. And then once that gets mastered, you will then become aware of the next chakra or lens, which is you will be aware that there are other beings here, or other aspects of yourself, depending on how you want to look at it. And it will become a natural desire, though that desire is totally different from place to place, to make contact, physical contact with the life or consciousness that is there. And so the second one, in terms of the third dimensional world, is called sexual. And so the sexual chakra lies on the next one. Once you've usually made those two connections, the next one that follows after that, which is sitting at the navel, and by the way, the third chakra is exactly at the navel. This whole thing where the Hindus say that it's 1 or 2 fingers below, and even a lot of the martial arts that say the center's down there, if it's there, there ain't anything that shows up on the computer screens, not a thing. And we can go right into the center of it, and that's because we all had that training, and we started looking in there, and saying, God, there's nothing here. Where's the third chakra? It's not here. And so we just went up and bingo, and I mean, is you take the belly button and you go right down the center. And I really think that the ancients were trying to hide that. They did so many secret things. I think it's one of those things that we thought was true. But best I can tell, that isn't true. It is right where you think it would be. Right down the middle. And so the third one that comes into your existence has to do with ego and controlling the environment, mastering the environment itself, being able to work with these new shapes and forms and learning how to move and all this kind of stuff, which ultimately turns into, in this world anyway, the control and the power and all these kinds of things that it leads to, the distortions of it. And so, but then you have a wall. In other words, the spirit won't even know that there's anything more than that. And so, in the beginning stages of going into a new dimension, you become totally involved in survival, sexual energy, or sex, and power. And if you take this is true of a person, or a country, or a planet, or a galaxy for that matter. And so, in terms of a country, you could take like the United States back in, say, the late 40s or early 50s. That's a real good time in there. And we had not discovered that there was anything above that yet. And almost everybody in the United States during that period of time was totally involved in the first 3 things of survival, sex, and power, and control, or combinations of it in one way or another. That was materialism. That falls in the thing of getting money and houses and making sure you got lots of food. Whether all these kinds of things are all fall in these kinds of categories. But at the same time, in the early 40s and 1950s, you could have gone to another country, any of the older countries, and certain areas of China. A good one is India, because we're more familiar with that one, or Tibet, but India would be a good one. And in India, they had long ago found out about this as a country and went up into these set up here, into the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. There's another wall up here. So when you find out where this doorway is, then you come up into here. And so India wasn't really concerned so much anymore about materialism or all that kind of stuff. They were concerned about love and sound, music, causal plane of how things are together, and the final spiritual realms up in here. They were concerned about other things that were more important. At the same time, while the United States was down here really putting all their energy into, getting the physical planes together. And there are people that are the same way. So this doorway here is one that, I mean, all you guys have one way or another found this doorway here, because you've all discovered this up in here. What you're now looking for is this doorway. You're now becoming aware that there's another doorway, that there's something else even above that. We have built in to our physical body, and why we did it, I don't know, another angle in here. We put this is the pituitary gland, this is the pineal gland, this is the, what do you call it, the medulla at the back. All you got to do is take this spot right here and go straight back. It's in a straight line from your third eye straight back. Right here? Okay, let me. Now, is that even? How's that? Slight angle? Okay. Whatever this is on me, this is where it is. I've got my finger right on it. It's right there on me. So that's the place where it is. So maybe it is a little bit lower down in there. It isn't up in Blim. There's another angle in there. We put this angle in there that, for some reason, I'm not sure why we did it, but it has really caused an interesting situation with the Ascended Masters, because when they went through the chakra systems of their own selves and they got up to here, they had a real hard time finding the seventh one. And so what happened is all the Ascended Masters, in terms of the chakra system of the earth, they went up to the 12th overtone of the 6th dimension, and you got about almost 8,000 Ascended Masters as of just recently, and only 3 or 4 of them were able to figure out where the 7th dimension was. Could find the doorway through. There's just a few. Of course, all it really takes is just one. Eventually, those 3 or 4 are training the rest of them, and they're now getting it. In the last couple of years, they got it. They're all flowing over now into the pineal gland area of the 7th dimension of the earth, which is really the 12th dimension is that 12? No, that would be 10 or 11. Not sure, 10 or 11 dimension. The 12th dimension is actually a crown on top of the head. Yeah. There are different ways of approaching this. In fact, the Anunnaki didn't do the system that we're doing. They did go back here first and came out this way to a chakra that's in front of you. There's another one out here in space, out in front of you, in front of your third eye. And they projected their consciousness that way and then made a 90-degree turn straight up. And it was through that particular way that they were able to find the doorway to the next dimensional level. And so it was like this L shape, and this 90-degree L, and they became known as the L's for a long time because of this meditation. And later, because they were the old ones, that's where the word elder came from. And knowing what that was, they were called the elders and the elder race, because of the meditation practice that they used to make this 90-degree turn. From what I'm being told, we're not going to go that direction that you're talking about. We're not going to come from here to here first as a race, though that is a possibility. Now, you may do that. No. But as an overall planet, we have, I guess, already decided that we're going to go up to here, shoot back over here, and then out. And I'll give the pattern. Again, I'm not saying you have to do this. This is just what I believe that we're going to do. There are a lot of concepts on the chakras, and I'm only giving one idea about them, and I'm going to give a very complex one in a minute, more complex than what you're probably just about ever used to seeing. And the energy flows also have other channels. There's a spiraling energy connections and things that are connected to them too, but I'm only looking at one way. Yeah.
Could you please name, you named the first 3 chakras, but you sort of skipped up to the head.
In terms of the octave, we skipped from the navel up to here. Now we're going to go, this is the heart chakra, but this is not the heart chakra from my point of view of universal consciousness. This is the heart chakra of an individual portion, or in other words, of love from one person to another, or love for music, or love for something but not everything. Love for everything is on the pentatonic scale, which is a more primary scale. There's 5 notes, the black notes. What we're talking about here is the white notes of the piano, and so that 4th one relative to that is up here, whereas the one that we're wanting to actually focus on is lower than that. So from my point of view, we have 2 hearts. We have a heart connection on the pentatonic scale, and we have a heart connection on the octave. And they're 7.23 centimeters apart when we found them. So this is the heart. The next one is if you're male, it's the Adam's apple. If you're female, you don't have an Adam's apple. And it's right in there, and that's the 5th one, and that's the sound currents. In terms of the octave, the next one is up here between the brow, but there's really, from my way of putting here, you got 3 in there, but really there's 5 in there. There's these 3, but there's one on this side, and there's also another one in the back of that one out in space behind it. And the pituitary gland is up here, is the one in front. And usually people talk about the pituitary gland as being the 3rd eye. Not from my point of view. It's not the 3rd eye at all. To me, this is the causal plane of the Hindus. It's where the geometries and the mental understandings of the reality are held. But you got to go back into the pineal gland in the center of the head, and that is literally the 3rd eye. The pineal gland, remember that picture of an eye that I showed at one point? It was a round ball. The pineal gland looks just like that. It is an eye. It's an eyeball. It is round. It has a lens on it for receiving light through. It's hollow. It has color receptors on it on the inside, just like an eye. Yeah. Yeah, it's to receive light from above. It's just as these eyes can see out this way but can't see that way, the pineal gland can see up but can't see down. And so it receives light from above. But these eyes see a certain portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. These eyes see 4th dimensional prana, or it's a different kind of light. And but the eye, I believe, the pineal gland can look around. It has a movement. And if the pineal gland looks through the pituitary gland, that's when the psychic energy is fully turned on. But if it's looking up, it's receiving the prana from above. Like if you look at a bird, their pineal gland sits on the top of their head with a thin, no more thicker than your eyelid, over the top of it, so that it's receiving the light from above as it's moving.
A baby soft spot?
The soft spot is that's where you breathe through. This is where the tube comes through. It's right in the top of your head. So when a baby, this is an important thing I don't think I said. Remember I said that when 13,000 years ago we fell, and when we did, we started breathing like this, and we didn't take the prana in here anymore. So when a woman has a baby, she's still breathing like this. The baby's breathing in the proper way. All the way through the 9 months, and all the way after it comes out, it's breathing in the way that we're trying to teach right now. And so you can look at the top of the baby's head, and you'll see this pulsing. Mm-hmm. In and out, and in and out. It's bringing the prana in. And if you were to look underneath, it's the perineum. Perineum is like in a female's between the vagina and the anus, that soft spot in the middle. That's where the tube also runs up through there also. And it looks like a solid spot also, just like this does. But if you really check a baby, you'll see that that end is also pulsing. There's a pulsing from both ends. And it's breathing from the both ends. But unfortunately, what happens is the mother is a much stronger field, a much stronger resonating field. If you take a whole room full of these big clocks, swinging, what do you call them? Pendulum clocks. You know, you can do this. Science has done this. You can just take a whole bunch of them, and whatever the strongest clock is, within about an hour, all the clocks will be moving with it. Every one of them in the room will be doing exactly in tune with the strongest one. And so the same kind of way, when the baby comes out, it's breathing properly, but the mommy's got the stronger field. So in about 2 weeks or so, the baby quits breathing this way and starts breathing with the mommy. In the same way, the animals that we have brought in close to us, the cows and the horses and the dogs and the chickens and all these other things like that, we overpower them too. And very quickly, they start breathing like we do. But not the deers and the elks and the wild things that stay away from us, and especially things like coyotes who are highly advanced. They know, man, don't get near them humans. And they're not doing that. This is why, again, I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but that's why the Greys. Did I talk about this? The Greys, if you notice, when they first started doing all their experimentation, it was first with cows and a few horses, a few dogs, but mostly cows. Do you remember the cattle mutilation that took place? The cattle mutilation took place primarily over the Colorado-New Mexico border because that's where their main installation was in Dulce. They have underground cities and constellations. They have them all over the whole world. If they did have, they don't have many more. But the cattle mutilation took place over the whole planet. They found cows that had been mutilated out on isolated, just everywhere, out on islands and countries all over the world, but most of it was done around Colorado and Mexico. And the mutilation, if you want to call it that, it was not, mutilation implies that they were ripped apart or something. This was not mutilation. Linda Howe is the kind of the expert on that. She works for ABC. She's done a movie on it called Strange Harvest, which was aired on ABC, by the way. You can still get that if you really want to know the story behind this. We've spent time with her, talking with her, and she said that when they first gave her she got all this money from ABC to go check out this cattle mutilation, which was a big thing a few years back. I guess it was in the 70s, pretty much, in the 80s, though it occasionally still happens. And she just started investigating it like a murder, to see who was doing this. And she went through a lot of governmental agencies and police departments and everything else, and talked to direct eyewitnesses and all this other stuff, and came to. Originally, she thought it was going to be either some kind of satanic cult or the government themselves or something else like that doing it. But the more she checked and the more she checked and the deeper she got, she goes, it can't be a cult. I mean, it can't be some little cult. It's all over the whole planet, and it's everywhere. And on top of that, everything was done with lasers, laser technology, and high, super intelligent laser surgery, which there's only a few people in the world who can do this. And there was hundreds of thousands of cows. I mean, somebody would have had to have been real busy doing all this stuff. And all they did is they removed primarily the breathing apparatus and the sexual organs out of the cows. That was the main things they were interested in, because it was the sexual energy and the breathing patterns that they were mostly concerned with. But the thing that got them, that she knew absolutely beyond any doubt whatsoever, that it was no one on earth, was because they have found these cows, lots and lots and lots of them, not all of them, but almost all of them. They found them everywhere. When they do find these cows, by the way, they'll find them with no trace whatsoever of any way that they got there. There's no car tracks, there's no anything, and there wouldn't even be a blade of grass touched anywhere around them at all. So they had to be lowered from the air. And but what they couldn't explain is they've even found them underneath trees like this, where the trees are completely over the top, and still no signs of anything at all. And I mean we're talking about police force going in there and looking for the slightest little thing. I mean, just like a murder. And absolutely no explanation whatsoever, because it couldn't have even come from the air because it was under a tree. Yet still, but the main thing that really got them, and which is the totally unsolved unsolved mystery, is that they have had every single red blood cell drained from them. And we don't have any technology known on the planet that can remove every single last red blood cell out of a body. We don't know how to do that. I mean, we can drain the blood out of a body, but it's still totally saturated with red blood cells. They won't even find one, not even one, in the entire body. And that's when she began to realize that this had to be done from someone off planet. But then, since then, she's had tons of evidence. They've had eyewitnesses where they've watched them come down and do this stuff, and lots of people have seen it with the same exact descriptions of what they look like, what the ships look like. She's even got the landing pad things of where they've landed a couple times, and they've got the photographs of all this stuff and everything, and she's utterly, totally convinced of who it is, and it's the Greys who are doing this, along with about 5 or 6 other cultures that are working with them.
And does the energy run counterclockwise for females up the chakras and clockwise for males?
No, I believe that it's, if you were looking down your own spine, you would find it goes clockwise for the female and counterclockwise for the male. Yeah.
If a mother is practicing the prana breathing, will the baby be able to stay doing the prana breathing, or is it out of
Yeah, we've been able to demonstrate this. My own Mackie, when she had Alina, who's now 4 years old, Mackie at the time. Now, Mackie is not doing this. We went through an interesting change, which I'm willing to share with you at one time. But for a long time, Mackie was doing the breathing. At this point, she's now become a Baptist because of her father. I can't explain all this stuff. But while she was doing the breathing, when Alina was born, Alina's soft spot, it took almost 9 months before she was influenced by other people. So when she was 8 and 9 months old, this thing was still pulsing. It was still going on. And these guys really had the right idea. They just put the hole where you breathe on top of the head. Make sure that it never does what we do. So you can't even possibly bypass. So they take their prana and their air right through, and it goes right through their pineal gland. And so they can't make that mistake that we do. This doorway here, I want to talk about these 2 doorways. This doorway here, between the third and the fourth one, that one can be opened in many, many different ways. But in everyday experience here in the United States, probably the way that a lot of people have been opened up is in a near-death experience. A near-death experience will show you where that doorway is, and you find yourself up in the higher realms, and you're never the same. If you don't make it, if you don't die and you come back through, you know that there is more to the reality than what you've been told, and so you will then you will be older, completely changed, and you will start seeking for that. It's just an automatic thing. You can't help it because you know that there's more. Once you know, no one can ever take it away from you. There's other ways. The Hindus have learned a long time ago how to do that through meditation. And so there's things like Vipassana meditation where you sit for 18 hours in a meditation. And in that kind of stillness and a letting go of all of this world, you can find the opening in ways like this. And there's other kinds of meditation that can find this opening into the higher centers. Many of the natural peoples around the world have used things like psychedelics. For example, the American Indians use peyote. And the psychedelics will also open that doorway. And the Americans in the 1960s came across one that changed the United States forever and ever and ever. It will never be the same after that, and that was LSD-25. And that one, 20 million Americans tried that thing and suddenly found out there was a lot of people who were wiped out from it also because there was no training, there was no initiation, there was no nothing. But they found out about these higher dimensional levels, and of course almost all of those people turned right around and became very spiritual. If you go through all the ranks and files of all the like Yogi Bhajan and the Sikhs and blah, 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 and all these things, people who are not involved in drugs or anything else at all. But if you sit them down and say, how did it all begin? Because I did. I've talked to lots and lots and lots of people. And they go, well, I went to this party. There is a vast difference in, there's different kinds. Just like if you go into a drugstore, there are different kinds of drugs. And all the drugs like cocaine, which you were talking about, is one of the, Gurdjieff used to talk about that. He felt it was in terms of spiritual growth, it was probably the worst thing you could possibly do.
Yeah.
Because it enhances the sense of individualism, of ego, and it's also addicting. And all of your pleasure drugs, your opiums and your heroines and all these kinds of things, that's just like, to do these is like committing spiritual suicide.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard to get back out of that. And some of them, like crack, is just about impossible. I don't know.
I can relate to that.
I don't know, it's pretty hard. But the psychedelics, on the other hand, are not addicting, and they have been used all around the world by almost every natural person there are. The Incas used San Pedro cactus. The Egyptians, by the way, though I never talk about it, though it's all over their walls and the papers have been written about it, they used a really powerful one called a mushroom called Amanita muscaria. And you see it all over their walls. And so when they put you in the final phase, they put you in the casket in there. They also gave you this mushroom to find this door. They were looking for you to get out to the top doorway. We don't need these things with this. With what we're showing here, you won't need any drugs or anything at all. This is powerful enough all by itself. You'll be able to experience the things directly without anything at all. Absolutely clean.
That's what
but we have to explain what the rest of the world is. You can't just totally close your eyes and all this stuff. Yeah.
Just a comment on the Reiki attunements seem to have done that for many, many people. It was that consciousness shift, and it opened their worlds. And secondly, I work with cocaine-addicted women, and I teach them to meditate from their hearts to their babies. And I have found that has been the key to helping them with their addictions, is being in that heart space and empowering them in that heart space. And it's totally gotten them off of the cocaine and substance abuse, which is a doorway.
Yeah. Cocaine is, you can get off of that one, and it's possible. Certain ones that were really hard. Boy. Heroin is really hard. So I've never tried any of those things, but I've seen so many people, and it's really hell for them to get out of there. But it's not a spiritual. You're not going to find the way to the higher worlds through those things for sure. You're just not going to do it. Anyway, there has to be, as Gurdjieff would say, there has to be some kind of outside source. This is what he means by a near-death experience, or a meditation, or a psychedelic or something that shows you the way up into these higher, finds this doorway, this opening. It's an opening in you that gets up there. And then once you get up there, there's another one. And this is what the Merkaba is all about, to show you this doorway right here. It's a meditation that will show you how to get up into the next levels. And we're going to do that, we believe, as a planet. We have kind of chosen a way, though there are other ways, and that way has to do, the different worlds are all separated by 90 degrees.
I wonder if you could make comments about individuals that I'm aware of, and I'm sure many in the room are aware of, who are not necessarily going up from the base on up, but have come in fully into their heart, with their heart fully open.
You mean born that way?
Born that way. And they have to deal with maintaining their consciousness in staying connected with the earth and have to deal with actual leaving. I cannot tell you how many people cross my path who are in that space, so fully in their heart, and they have to learn to be connected with the earth and then bring in the information and integrate it with it here. They're already open. And so if you could comment on that, please.
It's just called wisdom. It takes time. I don't really know. I mean, it's hard because we live in a world from, like Wilhelm Reich, if you're familiar with his work.
Oh, yes.
He pretty much saw that there was a disease. His way of looking at it was that there was a disease that swept the world, and that we're not in a normal state. And so what happens is, in a normal state, is where we come into this world and we have an open heart. When we first come in, we're just children, we're babies, and we just want to love each other, you know. But the world's already sick from his point of view, so this little innocent little baby walks up to another little kid and says, "Hi." And the little kid goes, "Wham!" And the little innocent one goes, "Whoa." And what happens is, there's a constriction of your nervous system, and the pain that you felt from that while your heart was open, because it's very painful to have something like that happen, you hide it in your muscles somewhere. You stick it down in some muscle down in there, which tightens up, so you don't have to feel it. And you also, there's this constriction in here. There's also an area in your aura that gets toughened, you might say. And there's an aura in your crystalline structure out here, out in the furthest realms of here, that gets a distortion in it. And the distortion could be a hole or a little bump or a plane or something else like that, which we were actually able to pick up with the computers. And so this just keeps happening until finally we end up with what Reich calls an armor around us. We get this toughened up shell around us, so you can do anything, man. It doesn't hurt you anymore because your heart's closed up and you're closed off. And so much of Reich's work was how to live, exactly the thing. How do you live in this world with all this stuff that's coming at you all the time that's not nice, and still keep an open heart? And that is a really, I mean, that's kind of the question. How do you do this? The Merkaba will, if you can get into the Merkaba and know it, then you can insulate yourself in such a way that you can keep your heart open and the things won't bother you. But if the person doesn't know that, then, well, Reich did figure out a system, and at least from someone who was already armored up. He figured out a system called orgonomy, and it's the finest system that I've ever seen of healing that I've ever seen. In fact, I experimented with it a long time ago. I went with it for about a year and a half to see what it was, and it was extraordinary. And Reich didn't know about the chakra system, except that he had developed mirrors that would reflect life force energy, and was able to calculate it and measure it, and instruments that could measure it. And so he discovered that there were these centers in the body that he gave them other names, I don't remember. He didn't know about the Eastern philosophy beliefs. And in the beginning, he figured out how to open these things, because they found them all constricted and closed. And he figured out how to open them. He could figure out how to open the bottom one. But when he got to the second one, which was the sexual energy, which allowed the Kundalini and all this energy to rise, then when he opened that one up, I think it was several people died. I mean, they died of an orgasm. Great way to go, I guess. But it was so much energy that it just blew everything out. And so he started by saying, well, I'll go to the top. He didn't even realize, I guess, a lot of it was in. He went to the eyes. And he learned how to unlock the eyes, because our eyes are locked also. Our eyes can't move very well. Our eye energy, because of this stuff that's been going on from the time we were conceived of, and even in our womb, when you're in the womb, all the way out, and especially all the way up between the time you're conceived up to about 12 years old. That's when most of it happens. your eyes get locked. You can't really move them. And they'll have you spin your eyes like this, or you can spin them around. You can get them going this way and back the other way, and get them loosened up and working around. And then they open up this chakra down here, and then they start coming down. They open up all the centers, and then they open up the sexual center. And found out it didn't kill people then, that they could handle the energy. And but then after they did that, then they found that once they got the central column opened up and everything, and you could handle the kind of flows, then they tried to deal with the actual armor itself. And the experience is remarkable. I went through with a group of about 30 people, and we all had real similar expenses. It was expensive. About $120 an hour. Experiences. You'd lay on this table in the soundproof room, and my doctor was a woman. You'd lay there, you'd take your clothes off, but she wasn't really looking at the body. She's looking at the aura and the way the energy fields would come out of the body. And you'd just be sitting there, just laying there on this thing, and she'd just be sitting over there, and she'd look at you for about 10 or 15 minutes, and she'd watch and watch and watch and watch and watch, and then she'd just go over to somewhere near your body and go, and that was it. Really, that's all she would do, just make a little circle like that, and usually a little tiny one like that. And you'd be sitting there, and all of a sudden, this wave would come up, and within a few seconds, whatever it was that she just released, whatever that pain was that you felt that happened, that you tried to hide before, comes up, and you can't stop it, and it's uncontrollable, and it just starts coming out, and it's just like in waves that are so. I'm sure that these waves are every bit as strong as childbirth. It's so powerful. And they come up and they come up, and they'll keep coming up for about an hour to an hour and a half to sometimes 2 hours until they finally start receding. And you feel the incredible pain that you felt when you were a little baby. And when it's all over, you feel like you're floating. I always wanted to see if I was actually off the table or not, but I couldn't move anything, so I couldn't tell. But I was sure I was floating because I felt so good. It felt so good to get that out. And they would do that every week. I remember I used to ride motorcycles, and I'd drive to this thing. But when I came home, it was like flying. So just every turn, you would be so sensitive to everything. But then just within 1 week, just in that 1 week, you would start to go back, you would start to desensitize again. And they'd have to go through it all over again until they kind of finally break down all these energy things, and you could begin to breathe. And so the only thing I don't really know what to tell you, it's except that the connection with the higher self, if they can make that connection and you can get in trust, and you can keep, then you know that you're beyond this. You know that you're immortal. You know that you're not going to die. You know that you can survive all this stuff. And you know that you're more powerful than the disease. Then you can keep your heart open. Let's just have 3 people sitting on a hilltop, and a UFO flies right up to them. A real one goes right up to them. And one person says, "Look at this. Holy cow, it's only 10 feet away." And the other 2 go, "I don't see anything." And you could say to yourself, how can that possibly be? That a real object can be sitting there, and they look right through it as though it's not there. We've had an actual recorded incident in history, of this exact thing, very similar. And it was the, what's it called? Magellan? Circumnavigator? Terra? Yeah. He landed somewhere in South America with all these big sail ships.
Oh, Magellan. John Canyon killed that.
Yeah. Well, it's a real important story to realize that if there's even one person here who hasn't heard it. These big sail ships landed out, and the big ones with the huge ships and all that stuff came in as close as they could to the shore, to somewhere in South America. I think it was around Chile, actually, I'm not sure. And they got in these rowboats and came ashore. And when they did, they were met by all these Indians, this whole tribe of Indians. And they're all standing there on the shore, trying to communicate, probably, and all that stuff. So how'd you get here? And the Magellan was trying to tell them they came with these big ships, which are just like right there. You could see them right there. The Indians couldn't see those ships. They could see the boats they came in on, but they could not see the ships. They saw right through them. They weren't visible to them, except for 2 or 3 of them, and those were the medicine men who were used to working in fourth dimensional levels. And those guys could see the ships. But the ordinary people, there wasn't anything in that water, because it was beyond their imagination. It was simply beyond their imagination. They could see the boats they came in. That wasn't really beyond their imagination, but not the ships. And it's exactly the same thing today with UFOs. If it's beyond your ability to accept or you're beyond your imagination, you won't see it. Your mind will just erase it. It's the same way with sounds and things like that. We've got all kinds of sounds moving through this building. High-pitched, squeaking, real loud, all kinds of sounds. We just erase all that stuff. We don't want to hear it. This is another way that we can block things out if we don't want to say something. And so a lot of your angelic realms and the ETs and UFOs and all this kind of stuff like that, it's whether or not you can accept it, if your belief patterns will allow it in, and then even if you can allow it in, is it beyond your imagination? Can you perceive of something that's so far outside of your imagination that you can't even conceive of it? Then the Area 39 doesn't know how to function with that. It just doesn't turn on. Yeah.
I have a question about the heart chakra and the importance of it when we do the exercise, and how important it is that you said to have an open heart. Now, for people who have a problem with that, because of, since childhood they may have had closed their heart, is there any exercises besides, looking at the 2 dots you said helps to open it?
That's not going to be enough.
No.
If you've got real problems with your emotional body, then to really work with it, it's going to be an area that you may have to go out and seek help or something to start working with. There's a lot of things out there. Again, the orgonomy is one of the finest ones. Well, waveform will help you, but if you've got emotional blocks, if you've got physical emotional blocks and things out there, you need to somehow work with this stuff. I'm going to bring my nephew in here tonight for about 15 minutes. I'll let him talk to you. He's not the only one that does these kinds of things. Let me just put out a little bit here. There are various ways to work with this. You could go through something like what I did with orgonomy, or there's Rolfing. See, the Rolfing, for example, what they discovered was that you got the blocks out here and in here, but they're also in the muscles. And so Ida Rolf decided, well, let's just go inside there and go directly to it, which is a little more painful, but that's another way that you could approach getting rid of some of these things. There are other ways, too, and there's lots of them. And there's one that's been developed in the last few years, which is called hypnotherapy, that is reaching its kind of maturity right about now. For a while, it was they were kind of learning what all of this was about, and so one of the problems that a lot of people have. First of all, I'll just kind of explain real quickly what Ken does, or people like Ken. Is the first thing they do, like what Ken does, is he lays you down, he touches you, and you go into a trance, just like that. Only it's a different kind of trance than that you would normally think of. And you communicate usually through your fingers, because that's about all you can move. And the very first thing that he'll do is go in there and make direct contact with all these entities that are in you, if you have any. And almost everybody does. And that is a remarkable experience to have them talk through you while you're sitting there listening, and these things start snarling up your face and growling at him and all this other stuff. You can't believe this is coming out of you or someone else. And he'll go right in there and get them all. They'll come out and give their names. It's interesting. You ask how long they've been in there. I've watched them do about 40 people, and I couldn't believe this. It makes the whole hair on the back of your neck stand up there. And he'll come in there and they'll come in and they'll talk through and they'll find out who they are, and then they'll ask how long they've been in there, and you'll hear these things of 8,000 years, 10,500, long periods of time they've been connected with that person. Just to explain it, that's what he does. He takes actually, I don't know what he does anymore. He used to make this golden pyramid. We actually saw this happen. When he first began this years and years ago, he would get the entity to come out, and someone else would be over the end of the room watching, and he'd go, and the entity would start talking out to that person, and he'd have to run over there and get that one. And so they learned to make this golden octahedron, and then he brings the angelic realms down. He used to, I don't know what he does anymore, and that would bring the entity and lift it out of the body and take it into the proper dimensional level. And you would see a total change in the person's face. It's just like you're in there by yourself now, But sometimes there's not just one. I remember one lady he had down there. This is this little sweet little lady. I said, I don't know if I really believe in this stuff. He lay down, and holy cow! I mean, these things just kept coming out and coming out and coming out. It's like 30 or 40 of them. They just kept coming out, coming out. Totally different voice, totally different expression, different names, and he just kept pulling them out. If you've had a lot of certain drugs, especially like heroin and things like this, you could have like 100 or more in there because you really lay yourself open for certain things like this. But anyway, that's the first level. He'll go through and get all those things out, if you have any. And then the next thing is that you have very definite blocks from past lifetimes, things that have happened to you that you still hold, the real traumatic things, like you got your head cut off, or your hands cut off, or stabbed, or shot, or blown up, or these kinds of things. You'll usually hold those energies in yourself around you. Ken can just go over and feel them. He doesn't lead you there or say anything. He'll just feel them and just say, what's here? You'll immediately go back to the time and be there. And he will work through those things and get rid of them one by one. So once he gets all those things out of you and then works through all the past life stuff, which takes a while, then you're in a position where he can start working with the emotional stuff that has occurred in this lifetime. And then once you work through all that karmic stuff, then usually what's been happening lately is something real incredible. And I'm not going to tell you what it is. Maybe let him see what he says about it. I don't know. I don't want to bring it up unless it's something you wouldn't normally think is occurring. And it seems to be happening with hypnotherapists all over the place, not just him, lots of them. But so what should we ask? But I'll tell you, this is not my expertise or my area. In fact, I don't even like to be in the same room when this guy's working. Or the same city if I can help it. But somebody's got to do it, and he loves it. I don't know how he does it. I mean, he loves to get in there and do battle and do these things, and so I don't know. You can talk to him when he gets here, and it sounds like it's going to be more than 15 minutes. This group sounds like I may lose the group here. But it is a real important part of all of this, and it's a very, very deep subject. There's a lot to it. I mean, we've just slightly covered the whole subject. But this all started with Elizabeth talking about how to keep your heart open. And And it is the whole thing. I mean, even if you're totally healed, you got it all there you are, totally healed and everything. You've got to figure out how to be able to move through this world and not let it happen again. And the Merkaba will do a great deal of this once you can get to the level where you can actually create the Merkaba and a living Merkaba field around you. You'll be okay after that. You can move right through anything. You can go right in through the middle of anything. It doesn't make any difference what at all, and it won't affect you. No spirits can come in you. None of these things. Nobody can direct thoughts at you. Nobody can do anything, and it can't harm you in any of those kinds of ways. But we got to get there, and that's the part. Is this last little bit of how to get that field truly created around every single person.
Once you've created the Merkaba, if you haven't gone through any of these processes to release these entities, wouldn't the light and the energy be so great that they would simply be driven off at that point?
Well, if you haven't cleared yourself of all these things and you've got entities and you're doing the Merkaba work, you're going to be real limited. I don't think the Merkaba will be. It'll never get to the place where it's a living field on its own. And whether or not you have really created that thing, I don't think you're going to be able to do that until you're clear in those kinds of levels. You've got to work through all that stuff. This is an extraordinary state we are in here. This is not normal. This is not natural. This doesn't normally happen in nature. Normally, we're like little babies that get to grow up nice and clean and easy and all the way through, and then we have the Merkaba all the way through from the beginning, and we don't have all these kinds of incredible negative distortions and things that are being flown at us all the time. And so,
couldn't a person kind of bootstrap themselves and just make such a solid connection with their higher self and go through such a solid series of affirmations and whatever that they could just drive those things away and reclaim their sovereignty?
You have the ability to do anything at all if you believe it. And if you really trust and feel the power of yourself, yes, you can do anything at all. You can heal anything. You can solve any problems at all. But if you don't think you can, and maybe all your life you haven't, when you do make a contact with higher self realizing you're kind of stuck, may say, why don't you go talk to this guy over here, or something like that. But the truth is, you have God within you. The Creator that created everything in existence, including the demons and everything else, is within you, is you, really, on the deepest level. There is nothing that you cannot do, but only if you can get to that place where you can truly believe in yourself and who you are and take action.
Sometimes higher self works through other people.
That's right. And even the reality itself. Higher self can actually work through the very reality itself in all kinds of ways that you might not even imagine right now. Cho-Cho's been sitting back here chomping at the bit. Which is real different. And it's going to lead into a point where we're going to talk about the Ankh and their concepts and ideas a little bit on that, on what they meant by it was the key to life. I can't go into this in great detail, but again, I'm just laying out little keys and pieces and things here, and you're going to have to go deeper within your own self to find what the full opening. I mean, almost all of these subjects you could sit here and talk for days, and all I can do is just kind of cross over them. So this chakra system is pretty much what you see in most books and things like that. But in music, it's not just an octave. There are the 5 black keys on a piano, and so there's really 13 notes. And what we found purely from science was, when we were checking the chakra system, is that there are 13 chakras running up the body. And that the chakras are topographically on the body 7.23 centimeters apart. And you can take from the tip of your nose to the tip of your chin, or across your eyes if you want to jab them out. You can take, this one's easier, take the tip of the nose to the tip of your chin and get that distance. And you got to lay down on a bed or something like this, and you can try this. And you put one finger at the perineum and just come up around. Then where that hits on the body, if you went straight in, is where the second chakra is going to be. And then when you come up that same distance from that point again, and you can try this, when you come back up, your thumb is going to go right inside your navel, which is where the third one is. And then when you come up again to here, it's going to come up to the solar plexus. It'll hit right in the mouth of the solar plexus. You come up, which is the fourth. You come up again, and this is the sternum chakra, the number 5. And again, you'll come to the heart. And when you do it again, you'll come right to the Adam's apple, which is number 5, 6, 7. And then from the Adam's apple, it'll come to the chin. The chin is a chakra. The Hindus talk about it. The only one that really gets into it, the one who thinks it's very, very important, is Yogi Bhajan. Talks about the importance of the chin chakra. And from there it goes to the tip of the nose, which is another chakra. This is 8, 9, and from here it'll go to the third eye, which we're familiar with, which is number 10. And from 10 it goes to what we call a 45-degree chakra. It's at an angle. It comes down in here, which is actually connected to the pineal gland also, which is 11. And then from there to the top of the head, which is sometimes called the crown chakra, number 12. And number 13 is over the top of the head. There's also a mini chakra from the top of the chin to the top of the head. Another one, which you saw on him. They're closer together. I'll show you that one in just a moment. And there's not, according to the Egyptians, there's not one chakra there, but there's 5 in a row. There's 5 total different channels. And the 5 rotate up from one chakra to the next by 90 degrees. They ratchet. They go, first one's this way, then this way. If I can move my hand around, then this way, then this way. Just like, remember the drawing of light? Well, that drawing of light happens to be exactly, that's this one. Oops. Somebody's moved it around. Here it is. This one here, I don't have it on the screen right now, but this one is an aerial. If you were to look at a human being from above, that happens to be one of the patterns, of the complex patterns of the body. And the chakras move according to light, exactly the way light moves, moving up there. Each one being 90 degrees away from the next one, 7.23 centimeters apart. And so there's 5 channels, and I'm going to describe what they are, and I'm just going to very lightly show you how the body conforms to these rotating patterns as it moves up. You'll intuitively see what I'm saying. I mean, you could sit down and very carefully work it all out and see a lot more than that, but this will be enough, I think, to the anus. And it is another it's another channel, and it moves up the spine, not in a straight line, but it moves like this. And then, directly behind the anus, you go back to the coccyx. You have the spinal column coming down, and you have the sacrum, which is a triangle, and off the sacrum is this little tube that comes down, which comes down and meets on the same plane as the anus and the perineum. And you have your entire spinal column is focused at that point. And there's this whole thing which I don't know if I'm going to get into a whole lot right now, but let me see if I've got it here. This one here. An angle creates an actual measurable frequency. It's in megahertz. But you can measure it. So does a rod, like this. If you have a rod, there is a wavelength, standing wavelength, that will come from tip to tip. and you can measure the frequency coming off of it. If you shorten it, you're going to get a higher wavelength, shorter wavelength, but higher frequency off of that, and you can measure coming off of both tips. People have done that. This is D.J. Nelson's work, and they have let me put one more thing. There's with every rod length, there is an angle. So anything that has a sharp point on it, like that, has a frequency that you can measure that comes off of it just by its shape. And so from 0 to 360 degrees, there is a different frequency, and these are all listed on here. There's pages and pages of this. There's all the different frequencies that come off of there. And with every angle, there is a rod length associated with it. So you can either use a rod or an angle to produce these things. And if you look, what the Egyptians used, though, was primarily rods. And they did everything. The Egyptian philosophy could do anything and just about everything you can imagine with just a stick. They were just made out of wood. We've looked at over 200 of these and took photographs. They're usually just made out of wood. It doesn't make any difference what it's made out of. You remember, was it Moses took his thing down and turned it into a snake? The thing is, thy rod and thy staff will comfort thee. It was an ancient science that we've long forgotten. What you can do, we were studying this, and they would put, again, these tuning forks in it, which was another thing, and these various things that can go on the top, like one of them was an ankh, one of them was the 45-degree one, these various things that go on there. They put an ankh on there, by the way, and you strike the rod. What happens is it just keeps increasing as it circulates the energy back into the rod again, and which is one of the keys about which we were about to talk about. Well, anyway, the spine comes down, and then here's this angle, this triangle coming off of there. I tried to find someone who could figure out what that angle is. I figured it would be somebody who must have measured in books, some doctor somewhere. I don't think anybody's ever thought about it, because we couldn't find it anywhere. Through all kinds of stuff, and couldn't find it. Finally had to go get a couple skeletons that were, these real ones that they use, and we got one male and one female, and looked at them and just best we could try to measure what it was at, and it was right at 52 degrees. And we don't know for sure, just measuring two of them, but it was real close to 52 degrees, and we were thinking it's probably, just because it is so close to it, that's the angle of the Great Pyramid, is 51 minutes, almost 52 degrees. It may be related to that, because we do have the actual entire shape of the Great Pyramid around our body in its perfection. Anyway, the whole spinal column comes down here and focuses on this point, and it has a flow of energy up the chakra, not up the spine, but up the chakra system. It swings wide. It goes like this. Like that. That's with your male or female. If you're female, then the one in front of that is the vagina, and the one in front of that is the clitoris. If you're male, it's the opening, instead of the vagina, it's the opening inside the scrotum, and instead of the clitoris, it's the penis. But the first one, the vagina opening, comes like this. And the clitoris or penis is a wider swing. Comes out like this to go up there. Now, you have to turn each one of these by 90 degrees. So this one's facing that way, this one's facing out, this one's facing back, this one's facing that way. Do you understand? Does everybody understand what I mean? You turn each one so you make this pattern going up like that. Now, I'll just show you what I mean by they have these angular directions. everything at the base of the spine is all flowing in this direction and out that way toward the front. You have a full direction going out that way and in this line. You've got the coccyx coming down. You have the anus and the perineum, the vagina. The vagina is a vesica Pisces, and it's flowing that way also. You have the penis, which also moves that way, and the opening of the penis is also a vesica Pisces, moving that way. Everything is in line, facing out that direction. And then this whole thing comes up, 7.23 centimeters, rotates, and if it's male, it would go this way. If it's female, it would rotate that way. And it goes over this way, and at which point, we'll just pick one thing. And you can see right at that level, right in there, you see the ovaries come out like this, over here. The next one comes up and rotates this way. Now you have a directional going this way at the navel. You can see the umbilical cord coming out that way again. It'll come up again one more time to the solar plexus. The solar plexus is a vesica Pisces, facing this way, out like that. It's just like a little mouth, only it's facing out in this direction here. And then it rotates one more time to right here. Now this is a very special place, and the reason that it's a very special place is because it's the place of completion. The first one was pointing this way. I mean, that's the front of it. The next one pointed over this way. That's the second chakra. The third chakra at the navel pointed this way. The fourth one at the solar plexus pointed this way. And the fifth one here points back. It comes full circle. And so this is the first time that this one here has it has both. It has the awareness of all planes now. And so this place is real special, the fifth one. It's the first musical octave is 5 notes, the pentatonic scale also. And so it hits right here. And this one has both. And so you see the breasts are separated this way, but they also go that way at the same time. Right here is that spot that we're talking about. Right in the center of that place, right there, which is the place of Christ consciousness. And in that spot, if you drew the line coming down the center, which I don't have on this one here, you would see what appears to be like a Christian cross. Do you see it? Top of this line here, and imagine a line coming straight down the middle would be the cross. That's an actual energy field line that's there, but the cross is not like a Christian cross. You think of it being going like this, which is okay. You think of this like that, which is the energy field of that. But it has, because of what we just talked about of this, it also has a line coming out from there. So there's an arm of energy that comes out in the tetrahedral field that goes out this way and out the back, as well as out that way. And so if you were to look at it from above, looking down, what you would see is this. Okay? Does everybody get that? Both of these are symbols for Christ. They're both different views of marking the same place. What it took the Egyptians a long time to realize, and was one of the primary keys to their unfoldment, was as they studied these energy fields very, very carefully, was that if you were to look at the human body, if you look at the human body from the front, at that particular chakra, this is what you see. If you look at it from the top, that's what you see. But if you look at it from the side, if you come over here and look at that, then you would see an arm coming out into space and going into the back. So the bottom part of it would look like this. In other words, this you wouldn't see this arm. This arm would become a dot. But the arm that comes out into space would look like that. Does everybody see that so far? But this top arm here has another component to it. And it was not known for a long time, but the component is a curve that passes through, that goes from here through the 13th chakra and back again, and that curve looks like this. Which is called the Ankh. Now, if you were to rotate the Ankh in its full 3D and turn it again, it would look like this. From this view, and these two are exactly the same. If you look at this one this way, but that Ankh, which is a curve, actually becomes a straight line when seen from the side. Now, there is a line running through the middle of this, like that. And I'm going to show you one more symbol now, which you'll realize is another symbol for Christ, and it will probably tie all these things together. You've probably seen this one. You've seen this one? Who hasn't? Who's never seen that? It's a very Catholic symbol, right? It's about as Christian as you can get. And, well, if you think, well, I retract that. It depends on who you are. But it goes way back there. And it's showing the cross, the three-dimensionality of that point, the line running up the middle, and the piece of the arc that is on there. It's showing all three of these things combined into one image. So if you asked a Christian priest what that meant, I really doubt if they could tell you. You know, all they know is that it's a symbol. It's an old symbol. And here's another thing I want to read to you. This is from Richard Noon's book, May 5th, 2000, whatever it is. In the ancient Greek alphabet, the letter P symbolically represented a man, number one, who, having overcome his lowest nature, his sexual center, joined his emotional nature, his heart center, with his intellectual center in his physical body. And P thus represented a man in control of his physical, emotional, and mental nature. Just the letter P itself. And so many of the Greek people who understood this changed their names to start with the letter P, such as Pythagoras and Plato and Pliny and Prometheus and many, many others. They all changed the name to begin with that letter P because of the relationship of what it meant to what we're about to talk about. Okay, what I'm about to tell you is what it is really all about. And I studied for 2 years with Thoth and his wife on this and studying Tantra, and this is not my job here to go deeply into this. I just want to remind you of something, and you can remember it later. But many of the Hindu systems feel that if the male ejaculates, that they have just died a little bit. And so there's this whole thing where he's not supposed to do that, and they have either invented, if they are true or not, these particular tubes that are supposed to take this up and bring it up around. Whether no one's ever found these tubes and whether it's even true, I don't know. But according to Egyptian philosophy, they don't feel that is necessary at all. The problem is, in terms of pure electronics, is that at the moment the male or the female has orgasm, the energy will either be sent up or down. Some people send it down, believe it or not. But it's got what happens is it goes to one of the poles, either the north or the south pole. And if you do that, you do die a little bit. You ground out that energy and you just lost it. And to continue that process from an Egyptian point of view leads to death. However, there is a way that it can be done where it does not lead to death, and in fact it does just the exact opposite. Instead of losing energy, it causes you to gain energy and increase your strength and your spiritual nature. And so, without going into the complexity of this whole thing, because they made you learn how to do it through all these systems, just thinking of a central tube running up the middle, they would train in such a way that at the moment of orgasm you would control the energy coming up until it got to this chakra right here, which happens to be right where the Ankh is. And then you would send the energy out the back, which is the meaning of you must receive the Ankh from behind. It won't work going out the front. The polarity is such that it doesn't work. And so it goes out the back, it comes around, it goes through this point, which is where the top of the head, and curves down, and the energy comes right back to the same place again, and puts the energy right back into your system, and actually strengthens rather than weakens. And there's all kinds of thoughts, even in Egyptian thought, of exactly how to do this in terms of controlling and these kinds of things. And I'm not going to get into all of that. But I do want you to be aware of it, and you can begin to, if you start experimenting, you probably will remember very quickly something, because it's ancient. It's very, very ancient. But that was the real, it's the hidden Egyptian meaning behind what that is about.
When you're pulling the energy up, do you have to have a straight spine?
No, it isn't the spine. It's an etherical tube running through your body, and I'm sure that that's straight. Your spine does not have to be straight.
I have a friend with scoliosis.
Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you.
There is just to go on this a little bit more, the Egyptian idea of Tantra, which I started to talk about before, is so complex it's hardly imaginable. It's no wonder it took them 12 years to even begin to get through it. They saw that there was 8 different personalities. Remember I talked about that, didn't I? Associated with the 8 original cells, and associated with the 8 electrical circuits. And their idea of reincarnation is that, okay, I'm focused in here right now. Well, that means that I've got my grid arranged around my body in such a way that I have one of the personalities that is opened. But they would teach them how to rotate this grid or spin this grid around to other ones. And a totally, completely different person steps forward. It's very interesting. And we've done experiments with several people on this, and it is very, very interesting, I'll tell you. And each one of you has 4 females and 4 males in you. And in each case you'll have an older male, a little bit younger, and usually one that's kind of, and most people we found was about a teenager. And then you'll have an older female, and etc., all the way down to a teenager. And so what happens is, the first time you ever come to Earth, you have to first go around and hit all 8. You'll tend to rotate to all 8 places. I've only been here twice. Only one other lifetime. I just got here. And so I've only got 2 places on my cube that are activated. But you'll first go through all 8 places. And then you might come to one, and you may run down that one for a certain number of lifetimes, and then switch to another one and do another certain number of lifetimes, and then switch to another one. And so you're trying to complete yourself in all these 8 different possible ways. And the Egyptians have you work with the sexual energy. We're just talking about sexual energy flow in this one, but they have you work not only with the flow, but with the polarities within yourself. The male, female, 8 personality flows within your own self. And simultaneously with the 5 different flows that are moving up here, associated with each one of those, and then all of the possible sexual polarities, and there's 64 of them according to the Egyptians, which the I Ching happens to be an exact mirror of their philosophy. And if you notice the I Ching, it goes from male to female, male to female, male to female, each one of them, and they're all associated in there. And it's a very complex system. It takes them a long time. When they finally get to the very end of this whole thing, at the very end of the school, after 12 years, they have them, they bring them in there, and they have whoever's in that body, whichever personality's out there, by this time they know how to move and rotate this thing. And that takes real skill in learning how to do that. And they will have them then bring forth in very rapid succession all 8 of the beings of themselves, all the 8 components at once. They have a conference, at which point they compare within themselves or within yourself what you've learned in this way. So in other words, you have 8 different things coming out here, each one being a lifeline. In other words, if you were to go back into your past lives, you're almost certainly going only back into one of them. You've got 7 other lines going out there that you may not even know that are even there. And as long as you keep this thing fixed in that one place, you're not going to know they're there. No matter how much hypnotherapy or anything else you got, it's not accessible through hypnotherapy. The whole circuit has to change. And so they will bring them all in at once, and then they'll all kind of compare their experiences and what needs to be worked on and everything else like this to find this balance in the cube, in this aspect. That was the emotional balance. This is what they did. It was very, very, very complex work. I worked with it for 2 years, and it was so complex I couldn't believe it. Yeah.
And wouldn't be the multi-personality created by some people?
It is the most, in most cases, unless you're possessed and this kind of thing, if you've got assuming you're clean and you don't have anybody in there,
right,
then all you got to do is you can be sitting here, and if you know how, just turn your thing, your field, just rotate it. You could be sitting in there, and all you got to do is, if you were looking out there, just rotate your field like that to another one over here, and you won't believe what'll happen. A whole different person will step forth out of your body, which is really you. It's not a different person. It's a different aspect of your spirit, a different reflection, a different series of experiences that part has experienced. Well, look at those hands going up everywhere. She's got it, I guess.
The other question was about raising the sexual energy and anking it. Is that something that's done during the entire time of making love, or is that something that's done at the time of orgasm?
It's only done at the moment of orgasm.
You take the if I show you your ankh, I can explain to you better what the question is that I've got.
Okay. How are you going to show me mine? Oh, my ankh.
Okay, so here, this thing goes this way, right?
No. It's sitting like that.
This way. I thought that was supposed to be the arms.
Well, you mean when it shows them with the little arms doing like this thing?
No, but I thought that was supposed to represent the arms of the person.
Not from this way of thinking.
Okay. Thank you.
I know that I don't know who came up with that, but there is one on the walls that shows the ankh and these two things.
When you were speaking about Tatai and I saving their whole civilization by teaching Tantra, is it because they're teaching all the different aspects and how to accept all the aspects as well as creating the Merkaba? Is that what stabilized everything?
Yeah, they didn't teach just energy flows and these kind of things. It was whatever they did changed them so much that they taught that and how it relates to everything, not just to... Is that what you mean?
Yeah, does that system still exist?
Well, to the degree that they were the founders of the Nakal Mystery School, and this is Nakal Mystery School information. This is what they were teaching.
When you were saying that you studied this for a few years and how complex it is that the system that Tatai and I used to save their civilization?
Yes, I think so. And there is a way that from this system that you can mate interdimensionally and all these other things. But I only got a little ways down. I only studied for 2 years, and then they left. And so I didn't get it all. I mean, I only got a certain amount of the information, though I know I have the rest of it, and I'm still studying what all of that is. They left me with all the keys. I know where it all is and where all the information is, but it's a long process. It isn't something that can be done in a short period of time.
Is the Merkaba, the creation of the Merkaba, part of it?
Yes, it is, except that I'm not real sure if they fully understood the Merkaba in all of its. This was the area that, like, when you go back to 52,000 years ago, much of the processes that they were using were real primitive, and to what's being taught here, I don't think they understood all the things that were understood here. Because one of the first things that Thoth did when I came in here, I was directed to go to him when there's parts of the story that I don't say everything. I can't say everything. One of the very first things that happened was the reason that I was directed to him was I had to get his memories, because I haven't been here, but just for a short. I only got here in 1819, so I haven't been here for very long. I don't have his memories, so I needed his memories, and he needed the information of the Merkaba. So we exchanged, and I gave him. That was the first thing he wanted before we even started getting into anything. He wanted the information on the Merkaba, which they were lacking. They had developed certain degrees of it and certain aspects of it, but they didn't know the whole, all of everything that we had brought back from a much higher level.
So who taught you the Merkaba then?
I've known it for a long time, and nobody really had to teach me that. I brought it down here, and it doesn't belong to me. I mean, it belongs to all of us. We all know it, but I brought that with me. That was the one thing I brought with me, and it was, but it was my what I would call my great grandfather, Melchizedek Melchizedek, who was the one that re-instructed me on the use of it as soon as I got here. And so I guess if I had to say where it came from, that's where it came from. And he's the one that has been here. He's been here for a little over 200,000 years, watching over this experiment that's been taking place here of consciousness, making sure that, to the best of his ability, that nothing goes too crazy.